The following is part 3 of a Barefoot Lawyer Reports on China interview with Frances Hui by William Saunders, Director of the Center for Human Rights. To listen to other parts of this podcast, please check the link in the description.
Like you said before, of course, everybody should be a kind of loyal citizen of their country, but that doesn't mean being quiet about human rights abuses. And if we look at history, for instance, in the United States, nobody would advocate that the Catholic Church should have been quiet about the legal discrimination against Black people that was here in the 50s. So the church has to be able to speak up whenever it sees injustice. That's the prophetic role of the church. Of course, the Catholics are loyal citizens, but the government has to reciprocate by acting justly. So let me ask you, Frances, what would you hope that could be done at this point? What do you hope the U.S. could do to help the people in Hong Kong?
Well, I think the very bare minimum is to prioritize efficacy for religious freedom and the release of prisoners of conscience in Hong Kong in all diplomatic engagement with Hong Kong and Chinese counterparts. I think the administration can have to be more direct and to give a more robust response on the things happening in Hong Kong. um, Article 23, it's a great threat to freedom in Hong Kong. I would argue that it's even more egregious than the national security law that was implemented in 2020. So the US administration really, the US Congress administration, they all should prioritize efficacy, prioritize Hong Kong and, the prisoners in Hong Kong calling for their release, and in particular of talking about religious freedom in their diplomatic engagement with China. There's other thing that the U.S. can do. For example, it has the rights and their tools under its disposal to impose sanctions on people in Hong Kong that are responsible for violating human rights in Hong Kong. So the US should also make full use of this sanction tool to hold bad actors accountable for their violation of religious freedom. This is not something that they have thought about. They haven't imposed any sanctions regarding Hong Kong in the past 2 years, and it's just been sitting there. No one has been held accountable, and we really need to respond, have a robust response, and this is one of the options that they can use. And I think the religious communities, religious leaders, they should all I would recommend that they develop an advisory board of its own with experts on China's affairs to better understand the development on the ground to the religious persecution in Hong Kong and China. I know that the Holy See actually has a commission set up by Pope Benedict the 16th in 2007 to advise the Vatican on relations with China, which Cardinal Zen was part of. But the body hasn't convened under Pope Francis, and the Vatican policy toward China has been, plainly led by Vatican officials. So I think, religious states, we could all be better informed by the commission members and people who actually understand, what's happening on the ground, who, also have firsthand knowledge and extensive connections with faithful in China. I think that's also the first step that they can take at this point. And again, speak up on the threats to religious freedom in Hong Kong, and resist from being complicit with the Chinese government in subverting our own religious values and our faith. I think these would be kind of the recommendations that I would make to really like global religious leaders, not just the Vatican, not just Pope Francis, but also applying to other religious leaders around the world.
Yep. I would say anybody listening should just think about it. If you if you're a Catholic in your Catholic school, or if you're a Protestant or whatever, some other faith, what would it be like if these kind of things were happening in your school or in your church? Imagine these kind of things happening, so the listener can hopefully put themselves in the shoes of people who are suffering under this. And we can see the trajectory for Hong Kong by what's happened on the mainland. And it's important to stand up for injustices. And I think everybody listening to this podcast would be committed to doing so. So we have to have solidarity with the people in Hong Kong, and we need to stand up for them. And the only way to do it is through, or the most effective way is through our government. So all American citizens listening to this, you should tell your congressman or woman, you should say, this is wrong. The U.S. needs to do something. It's your congressman's job to figure out what's best to do. And if you have ideas, you should tell them. But your main job as an American citizen is to tell them, this really matters to you. Let's do something about it, because the wheel is turning and it's crushing down on freedom in China and Hong Kong. And unless we do something about it, it will be snuffed out. And it's not a good idea to wait 10 years and talk about what we should have done. The question is, what can you do now? And each of you listening can do something. That speak to your congressman or woman, write a letter, tell them to do something about what's happening to religious faith and democracy in Hong Kong. Frances, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I think you were absolutely right. I think, as I said, religious freedom hasn't been something that people have been discussing when they talk about Hong Kong. But the report that I put out in January, and also another report published by Hong Kong Watch last year, are ways for us to, kind of surface that issue and to start the conversation, the discussion about the threats to religious freedom in Hong Kong. And Ben and I, the author of the Hong Kong Watch report, Ben Rogers, and I have talked about this. Like we said, this is not coincidence, because both of us see the problem evolving in Hong Kong, and the international community should really pay attention to what the religious communities are facing right now. And at this point, it's still early, it's at the early stage of CCP trying to take over the religious communities in Hong Kong. Perhaps there is something that we can do to kind of mitigate the risk, and to slow down the process at least. And to do that, we need to raise awareness and to bring it up to our government and to let them know that this is happening, and also share it with our friends in church. Maybe they would be interested to know,
Yeah.
because injustice happening in Hong Kong isn't just, injustice happening in one place is injustice happening everywhere. And we should all, as Christians, as Catholics, we should all stand up for justice and to fight for religious freedom everywhere.
Yeah, Frances, do you want to say, or I'll say anyway, anybody who'd like to see the report, you can find it, Hostile Takeover, the CCP in Hong Kong's Religious Communities. If you go to the website, which is www, I can't quite read it,
The CFHK.org.
CFHK.org, yeah.
Yes. And if you go onto our website, you will find publication and the report posted there. It's a really long, 55 pages page long report, but it has really good stuff in it. So give it a
Yeah.
read. And yeah.
And it has an executive summary and it has an introduction and everything. So again, you don't have to, you shouldn't be intimidated to look at this. It's pretty reader friendly.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, we'll link to when we in our podcast, we'll link to these things, and we'll repeat some of this information. But I want to thank you for joining us for the Barefoot Lawyer podcast, and I encourage you to keep fighting for religious freedom in Hong Kong.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
The Catholic University of America's Center for Human Rights has published a documentary on the United Nations Universal Declaration on Human Rights. The documentary features world-class human rights experts, from former State Department officials to ambassadors and human rights activists. It can be found on our website at catholic.edu/chr.